Good afternoon. Welcome back to the Johnson Space Center for our post-landing news conference for STS-95. With us today to talk about the end of this mission are Tommy Holloway, NASA's Space Shuttle Program Manager, Linda Ham, the STS-95 Entry Flight Director, and Dr. Sam Poole, the Assistant Director for Space Medicine here at the Johnson Space Center. And we'll start off with Tommy.
Well, as you just saw, we have landed the STS-96 shuttle mission. That's the 16th straight landing at the Kennedy Space Center, and throughout the program, 45 landings at Kennedy and 45 at Edwards, and one at the White Sands facility. This was an outstanding mission in execution on orbit. I think it sets a standard for the future, absolutely exceptional performance across the entire system. And in order to characterize that, I'd like to share with you a little bit about what was planned and operated on STS-95. 95 was a showcase of the utilization of the space shuttle. We performed a large number of pressurized research inside the Space Hab as well as in the middeck of the space shuttle. Over 83 experiments were executed, and almost all were at or over 100% successful. We deployed a satellite. We also deployed and retrieved a Spartan after spending a great deal of effort and focus on ensuring that that would be successful. We provided astronomy pointing support for the IH experiment, and that all went very well. The host experiment looked at the systems that will be deployed on the Hubble Space Telescope in the servicing mission number 3, a cryogenic thermal stowage unit that performed exceptionally well, a computer system, a recording system, and also a fiber optics experiment to support the technology of future implementation on perhaps the space shuttle. The station demonstrations activities went extremely well. We demonstrated the space vision system that will be used on both the shuttle and deployed on the station in the future to help the manipulator systems position large structures in the future. We also demonstrated a remote land inside the cabin that will be used on the space station system sometime in the future, as well as a new colored printer that not only gives the crew colored capability, but gives them page size displays instead of long rolls that they have to spend time cutting up and organizing. A host of supplemental objectives were accomplished to improve and understand the effects of zero-G on humans in space, and perhaps Sam will say something more about that. Also, during the preparation for and execution of this flight, we had a heightened attention brought on by our PS2, Senator Glenn, and of course the program welcomes that and appreciates it. In execution, it was a very complex and diverse mission with 84 experiments on, and as I said earlier, the team executed it flawlessly. It was an outstanding performance enabled by the planning, the training of the people that worked prior to the launch, and also the focus of Kirk Brown, the commander, who I think did an exceptionally good job and throughout the preparation for and execution of the flight. The system overall performed exceptionally well. I believe on the orbiter we have 3 anomalies at this time, and including the parachute door. And as you have seen on the television, the door, we did lose the door prior to liftoff. The parachute was not significantly damaged through ascent and was intact after we landed. We've continued working on the cause of losing the parachute door, and at this time we don't have the answer, although we spent a great deal of time making sure that we understood what the consequences might be both on orbit and during entry, and the team did an outstanding job in that respect. The propulsion systems on this mission also performed flawlessly. The systems that are managed by the projects at the Marshall Space Flight Center. I've been intrigued by the intensity of the focus on this flight brought on by PS2, Senator Glenn, and have wondered what basically drives us to be toward the intensity that we have. To share a little, and I've also experienced it personally, and share with you what I mean by that. My grandkids, some have been interested in the space program for some time. My 5-year-old can tell you about Saturn V rockets and space shuttles and so on and so forth. His name is Carter. But this time my 3-year-old granddaughter, Abby, got excited about the space program and watched launch on launch day and the coverage on launch day. And when they switched to the regular programming after the ascent coverage, she cried because we no longer had the attention. My wife and her friends have been very, very interested in this time, and for the first time, I think some of them knew who the crew commander was, and of course they also knew who PS2 was. My mother, who is almost as old as Senator Glenn, was also had a heightened awareness of what was going on, and so on and so forth. I wondered what all of that was about, and I came to the conclusion it was about being interested in exploration and interested in the space program and what goes on. It's the spirit of exploration and it also demonstrates to me that the American public is still interested in the space program and what we might do in the future as we go forward and leave Earth orbit. So today that brings us to the next era. The space station assembly is about to begin. We will launch the first American element on board the space shuttle on December the 3rd. We're looking forward to that. It's going to be a challenge for the entire shuttle and space station team. It's an enormous job. We're looking forward to it with excitement and anticipation. But I believe the team is ready for that, and I trust that we will follow that, what technically is a most exciting era of the space program, with the same interest and vigor that we have STS-95. Also, I'm looking forward to the future when the space shuttle will launch 60,000 pounds of logistics in the crew to an expedition and go into Mars sometime in the future after the space station is assembled. And at that time, we can truly say that the spirit of America is alive and well, and indeed our dream is alive and well. Linda?
Thanks, Tommy. Linda?
Thanks, Tommy. Okay, now we'll direct our attention to today's entry. The major driver for determining whether we're going to land on a given day in a given rev, of course, is the weather, and that was a factor that we worked today. What we had was initially yesterday, we were a little bit concerned with having low clouds at 4,000 feet and a chance of being no-go due to that. When we came in today, this morning, and start looking at the weather, we found out that that wasn't going to be the factor. Rather, it was going to be a crosswind, with the winds picking up some, a little bit more than we predicted yesterday. We got fairly close to landing, maybe an hour and a half, hour before the deorbit burn. The crosswinds were picking up and peaking around the limit of 50 knots, sometimes a little bit above that. As we got closer, the wind still stayed up around the 16-knot range. It was practically a direct crosswind that we were looking at. The forecaster did change his forecast to give us a 16-knot crosswind, Our limit is 15, and what that protects is really the orbiter limit of 20 knots with 5 knots uncertainty, and that uncertainty is in there for days where we think the direction's going to shift more to a direct crosswind or the magnitude's going to increase. Today, we were really confident that the maximum wind we were going to see was 16 knots, and since it was practically a direct crosswind forecast, that the wind shift would only help us and not hurt us. With that, we also factored in the fact that the SDA flew those approaches and reported that there would be some slight turbulence, possibly below 600 feet, which would probably not be felt in the orbiter, it being a bigger vehicle, and that the lateral and directional control was good, and the crosswind was not a factor. So we felt confident that it was a good day to land. We also knew that the one rev later opportunity at KSC had the same cloud forecast and nearly the same wind forecast. Edwards, for its opportunity, was right at the wind limits, also was at the gust limit and was also at the headwind limit. We knew that the forecast for the next day, tomorrow, was very bad at Edwards, and the clouds would have been worse at KSC. So we were looking at a really good opportunity in front of us and elected not to pass it up, knowing that there was a slight chance that we would have a 16-knot crosswind. When we landed, the observation was a 9 gust 14 direct crosswind, so we probably landed with something between 9 and 14, which is within the limits. So that's a major thing we worked today. As Tommy pointed out, the orbiter systems were in excellent shape. The drag chute, we talked about it a lot yesterday, what we do for inadvertent deploy, and also talked a lot about the fact that we felt like it would remain intact, which it did, and it looked pretty good post-landing. The forward RCS, if you've been listening to the loops, you find out that we closed all the valves in the forward reaction control system after landing, and this was because we saw a temperature indication on the fuel tank coming down, and sometimes if you have a very, very, very small leak, we'll see the temperatures come down. So we just were conservative, secured the system, watched it. We had KSC ground personnel go sniff the area for potential vapors, fuel vapors. They found nothing. We saw nothing in the pressures coming down, so we went and opened up the manifolds, and so everything was nominal for landing with the forward RCS. That's all I had to report. The landing looked perfect, even with, we had that wind, but everything was nominal. Of course, we didn't deploy the chute as we planned and talked about yesterday. That's all I had.
And I should say that Linda and her team did an outstanding job today, as she does every time.
Thank you, Tommy.
Dr. Poole.
Well, for those of us who work in the life sciences, this was really a wonderful mission. We have much to learn and to study and analyze now that we have a tremendous amount of data that we've gathered through the process so far. I can say that the state of crew health pre-flight and in-flight was excellent, and I think you can see as we just observed the crew walk around, they're doing well at this point in time. Unlike some of my colleagues, when the wheels stop, our job sort of begins in some respects and will continue for the next several days during the recovery of the astronauts after this trip.
Thank you, Dr. Poole. Okay, we'll take questions here in Houston first before going down to the Kennedy Space Center for a number of questions. Tim?
Tim Gaffney with the Dayton Daily News and Cox News Service for Linda Ham. Were you right down to the wire on the decision this morning? It was, what, just 9 minutes before the deorbit burn when you gave them the go, as I recall. And also, any noticeable effects on the landing gear or tires at this point from landing without a drag chute? And any signs of effects on the drag chute and the drag chute compartment?
Okay, first on the winds began to pick up late. So we did make the decision fairly late. As you said, we gave the crew go about 9 minutes before deorbit. That's about as late as we like to go. We could go later if we had to. We start one of the APUs 5 minutes before the deorbit burn, so we usually try to get the call up before that. The winds were steady at 16 knots. I talked to the weather. They were confident that 16 was going to be the maximum. Worst case, a direct crosswind, that's all you're going to have. So we knew that 5 knots of dispersions that we keep, we weren't going to get any higher than that 16. So I was very, very confident in that, but we did wait. On the drag Let's see, the second question you asked was a tire. Did we have any additional tire wear? All I could tell is what I saw you on the video post-landing, and all the tires looked pretty good. You know, we've landed quite a few flights. I believe it was 44, maybe 45 with no drag chute before. And it just is sort of extra margin, if you will. So everything looked real good. In the drag chute compartment, all I can tell you is what we saw from the videos also, and that looked pretty nominal. All the retention straps looked like we were there. The mortar looked good.
Okay, I think we'll go down to the Kennedy Space Center now for questions.
This is Phil Chen of Earth News for Linda. Do you know if you got all the test inputs in for the crosswind DTO? Any indications from Kurt about that?
We haven't asked Kurt yet for his inputs. We would like to get what he thought the handling qualities of the vehicle was post-landing. We'll look real hard at all the data to see what kind of wind we really had. We do have some DTO test wind towers that we can get the data from also. It was somewhere probably between 9 and 14, so there is a chance, since 10 or higher is crosswind DTO, that we'll get some data. We'll just have to wait and see.
Beth Dickey with CBS News Radio. Two questions. The first one for Tommy. You said that almost all of the experiments achieved 100% of their objectives. Which ones did not?
I don't have that information at my fingertips, but there were some of the experiments that, due to their hardware difficulty, did not achieve 100% of their objectives, and I don't have that particulars with me today.
And my second question for Dr. Poole. Typically, the ground crews don't go in to assist the astronauts out of the shuttle until about 45 minutes after landing. It seems you were about 20 minutes early today, and then quite a long time seeing the astronauts come out of the people mover to do their walk around. Can you explain why that happened early and then the crew came out so late?
Well, I don't have all the details, but I know that there were special efforts put into getting the hatch open and getting the people from the middeck into the CTV, and that went very well indeed, as you can tell from the timeline. The crew decided that they would walk around after this mission, and that they would do so, so to speak, in their shirt sleeves. So it took some time to take off their suits and get everything ready to come out of the CTV and walk around.
This is Craig Cavalt with Aviation Week for Tommy. I think, as you know, the Russians called Thursday or so and asked whether it'd be possible to make a plane change on the FGB launch. So question relates to STS-98 and downstream. Obviously, a change like that would change the launch times for the FGB, change the launch times for STS-88, cause a lot of studies on sun angles, beta angles, and so forth. Is NASA given any real serious consideration to taking the Russians up on the idea of a plane change for ISS, and or really is NASA about to tell the Russians thanks but no thanks?
Well, Craig, I would characterize it this way. NASA is in the process of very carefully reviewing with the Russians the pros and cons of their proposal. And at the current time, we would plan on proceeding with the normal plan.
Well, a follow-up to that, Tommy, that if you're going to give serious consideration to it, I would think that would cause quite a major effort at JSC and possibly other centers to run that to ground. Are you going to give it fair consideration, but are you saying really chances are no change to the station plane?
Well, serious consideration is a matter of degree, of course. I would tell you that you're right. There would be a significant amount of work involved in redoing the plans, doing the thermal analyses, adapting to a new timeline, and ensuring that all the data was in place. It's probably premature for me to say that that's not something that can be done and would be unilaterally rejected. However, at the very top level, we are preparing the station management to be able to discuss that with the Russians, and that will be done next week. And I believe decisions will be made toward the end of the week.
This is Stephen Young with Reuters for Tommy Holloway. I'm wondering if you could go into a bit more detail on the status of the investigation into the drag chute door. I'm wondering if you were able to recover all the pieces, particularly the pins and hinges that held that door in place, and whether you've ruled out any particular areas yet, such as a design problem or human error in installing the door.
Well, Stephen, first we did recover the majority of the door. It did break into the frame that comes out. It did break into pieces when it hit the ground, or the flame trench. But we have recovered most of it, most of the important pieces. We do not have all of the pins. Remember, they're sheared when it breaks loose. We did recover the lugs. We have found RTV as it should have been in the shear pin holes. Things look normal at this point. All of the paperwork associated with the installation of the door has been reviewed, and that all looks normal at this point. The environment associated with this particular launch in terms of the acoustics involved during the ignition phase of the flight looks normal at this point. So at this particular time, we have not ruled out anything, and we have not determined any particular cause.
And for Sam, Paul, when we saw Senator Glenn walk around the vehicle, he looked as though he was walking a little gingerly, perhaps a little shaky. I wonder what your impressions were of his appearance, and whether you can describe the kind of disorientation astronauts might experience at that stage after landing.
Well, many people who return from spaceflight, even the relatively short ones, have what we call ataxia, and that's a little bit of an unsteady footing. They need to be a little bit careful, particularly when they turn corners and that sort of thing, and I think that's what you were seeing in the Senator.
Stefano Cordan with Popular Mechanics. Was the Senator carried out of the shuttle, or did he walk out by himself?
I don't have the details on that at this point in time. I know he was one of the very first to come off.
Steve Handelsman from the NBC TV stations. Follow-up question about Senator Glenn. In light of the fact that he did seem visibly unsteady, a little apparently unsure on his feet, but that his crew members, his crewmates, did not, what do you make of that?
Well, I think as I looked at them, I could see some degree of unsteadiness in one or two others. And it's not an uncommon occurrence in the younger group. And with an N of 1 with Senator Glenn, I couldn't make too much of a judgment with regard to that.
Expect more of an ataxia problem with an older astronaut?
Say that again.
Would you expect more of an ataxia problem? Am I pronouncing that correctly? An ataxia problem?
That is one of the hypotheses that had been advanced by those that were studying this particular problem prior to the flight.
Todd Halverson of Florida Today for Dr. Poole. I think I heard earlier that the cruise return to Houston was going to be pushed back a couple of hours, as well as the, I guess, the ceremony at Ellington. And I was wondering if you could tell me why that happened.
Todd, the crew return is now at 2 p.m. Central Time tomorrow afternoon. Commander's preference. They just decided after they landed that they wanted a little extra time with their families in the morning. Nothing out of the ordinary, so it's now scheduled for 2 p.m. Central.
Steve Handelsman again from the NBC TV stations. One final question about Senator Glenn and his apparent unsteadiness on landing. Why would you expect, if you do expect, why would you expect an older astronaut to suffer that problem apparently more severely than younger astronauts, and how will that factor in to the studies of aging that Senator Glenn will take part in at this point?
Well, it's a very good question, and of course one we're really interested in. As people age, they lose certain portions of their sensory apparatus, whether it's those sensory organs in the middle ear, or in the vestibular apparatus, or for that matter in the periphery. That is really something we're going to be very interested in looking at in some detail. One of the tests that they're going to do post-flight is performed on something called a posture platform. And this will really give us a very good and scientific look at the status of various crewmen as they perform that test.
Okay, that was it down at the Cape. We're back here in Houston. Seeing no questions, I'll close out with a couple of quick programming notes. The astronauts post-landing news conference down at the Kennedy Space Center is expected sometime around 5 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Eastern. It might be earlier, it might be later. Please check the slates that will appear on NASA TV for the remainder of the afternoon for updated information. Tomorrow, the astronauts will depart the Cape Canaveral Air Station skid strip near the Kennedy Space Center in the late morning time frame. And as I said earlier, they will arrive at Ellington Field for their crew return ceremony at about 2 p.m. Central Time, 3 p.m. Eastern tomorrow afternoon.